This will only be useful if you've basically never used any sort of like 3D modeling software. If you have like basic knowledge, you can make some basic shapes. Then, I mean, I will be going a little beyond that, but not much more. So that's like the scope of today's class. That's what you can expect. Uh, I should be sharing my screen, and there it is. Okay. So I'm using for Fusion 360. It's one of the CAD softwares you can use. There's obviously multiple. I recommend Fusion 360 because it's quite simply like the simplest software to get into in terms of 3D modeling, CAD modeling especially. Um, there are other softwares. I think you would have heard of SolidWorks, if you're familiar. Um, that's a lot more complex, but it also has a lot more features. As a result, it's a lot more powerful. We'll start with Fusion though. If you aren't aware, you can get this on a student license. So you can head out to like I don't know, you can Google Autodesk student license or something, and Fusion's included in that. So you can drop in a photo of your ID card, they'll cross check it, all that. Right. So the main difference between a CAD software and something like Blender or Maya, right? This is parametric. Everything you do is based off of parameters. Um, as simple as dimensions or angles between different lines, that's parameters. Everything we do here is constrained. So I'll run you through the UI first. It's quite simple. Let's see, we have, okay, on the top here, these are all your tools. Anything, this is like basically a menu. Left side here, this is your tree. I will explain more of this as we get into it, but anything that's in on your screen can be accessible through here, right? Everything will be included under this. These are your different pages. We'll stick with design for now. I don't think I'll be getting into much of anything else because that gets a little complicated. This is your timeline down here. Again, I will demonstrate that as we move along. This is your view cube. You can hold, click, rotate, or you can simply click the face you want to go, home to reset. Quick controls are middle mouse, just middle mouse is to pan, shift plus middle mouse is to rotate, and that should be it. And then scroll wheel is obviously zoom. You can't see me zooming in and out because it is scaling. But to make a point of that, I forgot. Right. This controls are actually a little different. They're not standard. Step into any other software. Middle mouse is usually rotate, and then control plus middle mouse is something like pan or zoom, and then shift plus middle mouse would be pan. Fusion does it a little differently. You have to keep that in mind. Viewports, we'll worry about that later. So there are some settings I wanted to change immediately, right? Disable incremental move. It's a horrible setting to have. I despise it. Get rid of it. You will see, I think, if you launch Fusion for the first time, this is what you will see. It's a layout grid. This is what sets your base, right? That gives you a 2D reference in a 3D space. Since you're working on a 2D monitor, it does get a little confusing sometimes, but you'll figure it out eventually. Uh, Sorry. Me personally, I have it disabled. I don't use it, but for the sake of this, I'll leave it on. Snap to grid, you can also disable that. It's not strictly necessary, but it is quite useful. Camera settings. So visual style, this is what the, okay, let me just quickly drop a square and I'll also explain how I did this in a second. Right? Sure, keyboard. All these display settings will give you different views, right? So if you wanted just wireframe with hidden edges, I will now see a wireframe, and every dashed line is a hidden edge. So if I move my camera over there, it is no longer a hidden edge, it's like directly in my view. Um, Personally, I prefer shared visible edges. Up to you. This is all personal preference down here. Photo booth is default. Me, I enjoy working in dark sky. It is the darkest option you get in Fusion. Um, Effects again, this is mostly just how your body is rendered. Of course, if you have a slightly weaker computer, disable most of these. You won't need anti-aliasing in a CAD software, generally speaking. It's not that important. So things like these you can disable if your computer is a little weaker. Object visibility, leave all these enabled. That's fine. Camera, now this is the main thing. We have orthographic and we have perspective. The easiest way to say perspective is how your eyes perceive the world, right? We have two eyes. That's basically two lenses if you think about it. And these two lenses, when you look at an object, converge at that point. They look kind of at each other. They form a cone of vision. I mean, sorry, like two lines that converge at a point. That's perspective. So if we look at perspective here, you'll see that this is a little exaggerated, right? Like this edge is longer than it's supposed to be, effectively. That's what it is doing. Orthographic is true dimension. Uh, if I click this line here, it is telling me it's 58 millimeters. If I look at it dead on, it is still going to be 58 millimeters. In perspective camera, that would have changed. So CAD software, because the nature of the work we do, it is almost always going to be in orthographic mode. Then these are again your views. I mean, your camera controls. You can simply select pan, move it around, and that's that. Orbit, I actually do prefer constrained orbit. So that only allows you to effectively go around the z-axis. I totally know how to explain it that well. But then free orbit takes out any constraint, and now you can rotate the object onto its side. In constrained, you can't rotate the object onto its side. But if I go back to constraint and try and rotate it, it'll simply reset it, right? Um, and then double middle mouse is home, or rather center on the object. Fine, well, that's the basic UI of it. Uh, and then, okay, this is our tree. So, like I mentioned, CAD softwares are time based. Okay, everything you do is recorded in time. It is chronological. So you would have seen really quickly that the first step I did was I went into sketch mode. This is where we draw our 2D steps, right? Because to make something 3D, if you look at a Pepsi can from the side, right? You look at it from the side, even though it is a cylinder, from the side, it looks like a rectangle. Let me really quickly cover with a basic cylinder. The easiest examples to illustrate what I'm trying to say about projections, right? Fat soda can, right? This is a cylinder, but you look at it from the front, the right, but because it's a cylinder, even the right wouldn't change. This is effectively a rectangle. This is the projection. So this would be the front view, and this would be the top view. Now the top view is a circle. Together, they make a cylinder, right? That's projections. The shadow this body casts behind it if you look at it from that direction. So in our timeline, that records all our steps. So I first drew a sketch and then I used a feature on it, right? We have a multitude of features. I will go through them step by step, but each of those features takes a sketch and then modifies it in a certain way. Okay. Square, for example. So I will click this button up here, create sketch. Alternatively, I will also just delete these two while I'm at it. That's another thing. I can either delete from here, or I mean, actually, this is the best place to delete it. You can also suppress it. There you go, suppress. So instead of outright removing it from the file, it will keep it there, but it'll nullify any effect it has. So I can suppress this feature, right? It is still there, but the extrude, that's the feature I've used, is not activated. Again, really quickly, I'll just delete it for now. So up here, this is like the main, this is the meat of the software. We have to start with a sketch. Anything 3D can be broken down into something that's 2D. Okay, you'll have to figure out as you go. It is no, it is like I would say the most difficult part of CAD modeling. It's not figuring out what the buttons are. It's how to take a 3D shape and create it, right? Because this is not freehand sketching either. If it was a freeform software, that's way easier. We simply bring in a body, we break it down into a number of nodes, elements, and then we can modify. We can simply drag them around. We don't do dragging in CAD softwares. We are a lot more, so slightly more meticulous about what we try and do, because at the end of the day, right, this is more of an engineering thing, right? So let's say, in the case of like even robotics, if I'm trying to design something in here, more likely than not, 99, maybe even 100% of the time, God forbid, I will be putting something else in it. So whatever I make here, once it has been brought into the real world through a multitude of manufacturing methods, has to be the dimension I require it to be, right? Those are the parameters we are giving the body. All right, so we'll start with create sketch. Easiest place to start. Now I have selected. Now, obviously, there's three planes in 3D space, right? You have the what is it, ZX, ZY, and XY. Also, you can view that under here if you drop it down. Since this origin section is in our 3D space, it shows up in our tree, right? Um, I will select the bottom plane for a sketch, and very simple rules to sketching. You have and when you enter Sketch, you will see a new window called Sketch. This is where all your sketching tools are. We have these are your drawing tools. This is the bread and butter. A line, self-explanatory. You can select the length. So I will enter 20 millimeters. Millimeters, I think, is the default unit, but I'm also pretty sure you can change it. I don't remember ever changing it, so you might have to check that. And then we can select our angle. Now, angle is, well, this selects it arbitrarily, kind of really. But alternatively, I could draw this and then later define an angle. So that's what I will do. For now, I will select 20 meters long, the line, and I will leave the angle as is. So as you can see, since I've entered 20 millimeters, there's a little lock icon. So that is now 20 millimeters fixed, but I can still move it around. Come back to what I was saying. It is not constrained. We need this to be constrained. I can drag it around. That's not supposed to happen when it's constrained. So what I can do now, alternatively, if I didn't dimension it then, right? Maybe I want to draw out a shape and later on I want to constrain it. We will come down here, sketch dimension. I think the shortcut is D. There we go. You can click the line and that will also, you can dimension it there. Now 20 millimeters is fixed. That's fine. Still moving around space and I don't want that. I want it to be horizontal, or maybe let's say I want it to be 45 degrees to horizontal in this scope. Okay, let's just say for now, horizontal is how we're looking at it. What I can do is I have this line here, this origin line, in fact. So that would be X line, right? X axis. I can say 45 degrees to this. What I will do now is I will go back to sketch dimension, and this is in other softwares, it's called smart dimension, because depending on what you click, the dimension will adapt. So because I clicked only the line, it gave me a length. But now if I click the line and this other line, why can't I click the other line? Okay, fine. I selected it from the tree because I think the plane was getting in the way. But I selected the x-axis. It's given me a length for some odd reason. And now I can select this other line and it is converted into an angle. Now I can select 45 degrees. And as you can see, my line is now at 45 degrees to the x-axis. I think this, I simply projected the line down here. That's fine. Um, Now, it is still able to move around, because just because we have defined the length and the angle does not mean it is fixed in free space, right? There is nothing telling this line that it has to be between this point and that point. I can change that as well. I can add a dimension if I wanted between this and the origin, and I can give it the direct length of 20 millimeters again. Um, Still moving around, right? Because that's annoying actually. Okay, anyway, I can fix that. So I've only defined its distance from the center. So it'll actually draw a circle now, right? Because you only defined the radius. Alternatively, what I can do is I will go back to my line tool and I will draw a second line. I will click this line and I will press X. Alternatively, you can go up here and construction. So this dashes the line. It is still there, but it doesn't cut a surface. I will get to that again in a second. And now I will select this point and my origin. And okay, another crucial thing, you will see this little indication here, these two lines. That's parallel. Okay, that's one of the constraints the software offers. Constraints are very useful. Um, you will come to love them eventually. So effectively, what the software has done is, because while drawing it, it automatically assigned it a constraint because of how I was drawing it. The software thought, okay, since he's drawing it in line with this one, I will give it a parallel constraint. Software doesn't always do that. Sometimes it gets in your way. You can always delete them and like put in whatever constraint you want. Now we will select coincident, right? Coincident means one on top of another. I will select this. I will select the origin. Now the origin is fixed in space. In this file, this origin is fixed. It is not going anywhere. And then I will select this point of my line, right? What that has done is it has attached that point of the line to the origin. And it has gone black, even though it's kind of a lie. Fusion does this sometimes. It stays blue, it stays black. But anyway, I will assign this a dimension, right? Let's say 20 millimeters. Now I have assigned the angle and the radius, and the line has gone black. Black means that it is fully constrained, right? This is, if I try and drag it around, it's not going to go anywhere. It is fixed in 3D space, or for this case, 2D space. Um, that's one thing, but we can't apply features. We can actually apply features to a line. I'll get to that as well in a second. But I will leave this here for now, and I will come back to here, and I will select another plane, draw a sketch on. Now, I'll draw a rectangle, and as you can see, because I'm hovering over the origin, it has decided to lock it to the origin. Now I will say, I don't know, 5 millimeters by 5 millimeters, right? They're both gone to lock because I've installed my dimensions right here, and they're all black because these two, by nature of using this 2-point rectangle tool, means that they're equal. Of course, I can draw a line, a line, a line, a line, and I can constrain them myself. I can select these two, tell them they're equal, then I can make these two equal. Oh, no, man, because these are perpendicular. Oh, it's actually very convenient that's giving me this warning. It is telling me that, okay, fine, sketch is over constrained, right? If I select these two and make them equal, it tells me that geometry is over constrained because it's quite simple. These two are perpendicular, right? That means these two are parallel. That means these two are equal. So when I put an equal constraint, that already exists as a condition of other constraints. So there, that's constraints, the basics of constraints. Instead of drawing 4 lines and constraining it myself, I can simply take a rectangle tool and draw one. Of course, there are different types of rectangles. There's also a center rectangle. So instead of drawing from one point outward, you can draw from the center outward, or 3-point, which you can select 3 vertices. I'm sorry, vertices of the rectangle. Anyway, we have a rectangle here, and you'll see that it is a slightly blue area. It's highlighted blue. That is a closed sketch, right? There is these lines are circumvent. I don't know. I forgot the word. Circum something an area. It's closing off an area. Of course, a circle will always do that. There it is. Other tools are in here. Okay, yeah, polygons, ellipses. Fine. Circle and square. We'll stick to that for now. I'll get on to the other ones later. There is an area here. Now, what this does is this is the main part of where we apply our features. I will turn off my origin because now it's getting in the way. And there are a bunch of options, right? Extrude, and this is like the where why fusion is a little easier for newcomers. There are illustrations with every feature, right? If I click extrude, it tells me right there what extrude does. It takes a sketch and then it pulls it out perpendicular to itself, basically. And now I've taken a square and I have turned it into a cuboid because, like I said, right, a cuboid, when looked at from this direction, is a square. So what I did is I drew a square and then I'm pulling it out into a cuboid, right? Uh, Revolve is quite cool. What this does is so it's automatically selected our profile because our sketch was active, or rather visible, and then we select our axis. So I will simply select one of the edges as an axis, and you'll see that it has revolved the square around that axis. There, so now we have a cylinder, right? This is one of the ways to create a cylinder. Because if you remember, this is kind of a rectangle, right? We can just turn one around. Then we have sweep. Now this is where this line comes in handy. We have a profile. We'll select the profile, and we have the path. Can I select the dotted path? I can. What it is doing now is, you can also put this on curved lines, on splines, and all that. What it's doing is, it is taking the square and then dragging it along this line, right? Um, I can also select that. And now, instead of coming out perpendicular to the sketch in this direction, it is now going out 45 degrees in that direction. Of course, even though our square here is 5 millimeters, because of the way it is angled, the distance between these two is not 5 millimeters. It is 3.5, right? Um, that's just how projections work. Then another one, loft, right? This is also actually really cool. So you can see down here my first sketch, my second sketch, and then my feature, chronological order. If I went in here to my first sketch and I added, let's do an arc. Okay, I will select a 3 point arc. An arc is a section of a circle. I'll do 3 point arc. I'll select the first starting point, the ending point, and then a point somewhere in between. Now, as you can see, where the first point was drawn, we now have a small blue icon, a circle, and a line. It is telling me that it is applied automatically the tangent condition, where a line touches a curve only at one point, right? Tangent. It is blue. That's because I haven't selected the radius or the arc length, but I'll leave that for now. It's not particularly important. I will finish this. Now, if you'll notice, I'll go to my sketches in my tree. I will view my sketch. It has been added. I can go to my sweep. I can double click to edit it, or I can right click edit feature there. And I can go back to my path and I can select, please let me select. There we go. And now it is following the line as well as the curve. I have not had to delete anything for this. I have not had to add another step. I have simply gone back in time, modified a step, come back to the present, and then told this feature to follow the modification. Um, there. That's how chronology works in CAD softwares. So now we have it following the curve as well. Then, I mean, I think the rest of the sketch tools are pretty self-explanatory, but I'll quickly run through them. Rectangle, circle. There's obviously different types of circles. You can just look at it: two tangent circle, three tangent. You can select where the circle meets different lines. Arcs, as I just did, 3 point. Center point is another useful one. You start the center point and then you draw out your arc. Polygon. Now this is actually quite interesting. So I'll quickly draw a circle of radius 20. I will go down to my polygons. Now there's circumscribed and inscribed. Circumscribed is along the outside, inscribed is within. We'll do inscribed and circumscribed for now, but I will select the center point. You don't have to do strictly a circle, but it is preferable that you do a circle. And then I will simply, oh wait, I actually assigned the circle automatically. I forgot that part. But anyway, it has, as you can see, it is inscribing within a circle. That circle, I can now say 10 millimeters radius. That'll make it the same as my 20 millimeter circle that I drew initially. And then the other number is the number of sides. If I want, sorry, I meant three, a triangle, three-sided polygon, square, hexagon, octagon, so on and so forth. But we can do this. Instead of drawing 8 different lines and telling them they're equal and then figuring out where the center point is, you can just use that tool. Very useful. Obviously, same deal with the circumscribed. It just goes on the outside. So if I do 10 millimeter radius and draw an octagon on the outside, there you go. That's it. Again, all of these are close sketches, and everywhere where the lines touch cuts off a new piece. So if I draw a line along the inside here, this is now two different pieces. But if I didn't want this line to cut the thing in two pieces and I was using it only to reference a dimension or a constraint, I can click the line and I can hit X. Or again, on the right side, that's construction. Now it doesn't split the body anymore. It is still there. I can still use it to dimension, make angles, constraints, all the good stuff. But it doesn't cut my sketch in half. Um, Slot, again, that's very useful. Instead of drawing like two circles and then lines in between, you can just draw a slot. Slots are, you know what a slot is, but use cases are a little specific. There you go. It's there if you need it. Makes job a little easier. Spline is quite interesting. So effectively, it is just a curve, right? A curve does not have any hard edges. There it is. There's a finish button. So you have to click the finish button because you click escape and all that. It just cancels the spline. But what I've effectively done is I've put a couple of points, and I thought the spline has to go through this point, and then you'll see the little green handlebars. Those are modifiers. That's for that point. I can rotate it to. This is tangent to the curve that has been drawn. This arm. So I can rotate it, and the curve will still stay tangential to the arm, and then I can reduce it and increase. You'll see the circle's radius increasing and decreasing. So the smaller I get, the sharper. I mean, it's still never going to be a point, but the sharper the curve gets. Right? The bigger it is, the easier the curve gets. Um, Constraining a spline is a real pain because you have to define positions, the radius. I mean, defining the position is where it gets difficult, and then the radius of each point and the distance between each point. It's quite tedious, but if it's there if you need it, they do get quite useful. What else is in here? Points, right? This is actually quite useful. If I wanted to mark, what was I doing? Okay, right. So I was using this quite recently. I need to dimension something from the center of this line, right? Not from the edge, but from the center for unknown reasons. Maybe I don't want to do the math to subtract this length of the line. Maybe I'm just lazy and I want to dimension it from the center. If I click this line and then click this, it'll give me an angle because it's not truly 90 degrees. Right. And again, because the lines are perpendicular to each other, the software does not understand distance. Distance is only for parallel lines, right? What I can do now is I can simply go down to point and I can drop a point along the mid, and that triangle is the midpoint constraint. Go down to my dimension tool, select that point, select the line, and now I have a dimension, right? Points. You can mark stuff with it. Text, very self-explanatory. It puts a text box down and gives you a close sketch, so you can apply features on it. Mirror, quite useful. Let me say objects. I want to mirror my internal hexagon. What I can do here, instead of selecting 8 corners, I think I can double left click, and that will select the entire hexagon. It's a chain select. Whatever is attached to the end of this point will get selected. End of this point, end of this point, so on and so forth. Then I can select my mirror line, and this is my mirror, right, in 2D. And now we have an hexagon on this, and I can select OK, and boom, mirror. This is the mirror. This is telling you that it has been mirrored off of something, and we now have a mirrored hexagon. Octagon. It's an octagon. Well, circular pattern. This is really cool. Rectangular is also quite similar, but to circular first. I actually don't have anything. This, and I can literally just do a point. So what I've done is I've quickly drawn a circle and a point. Now I can go down to circle pattern, circular pattern. This is my object, and then I need to select a center point for that object. That. Now what I can do is I can tell it how, if I want it full, so a full 360. Partial, you can define what kind of arc angle you want the pattern to apply. We'll just stick with full for now. And I will do 10 circles. I can just enter the number 10. And what this has done now is about this point, it has mimicked the position of the circle relative to each other, of course, 10 times. And it has distributed them equally along 360 degrees. So if I was to measure the angle between two of these right now, I will get a solid 36 degrees. Right, so let me just quickly draw those two lines and I will sketch this. There you go. Over constraint because the what was it? The rotate. Crap, I forgot it already. Has already defined 36 degrees simply because of the conditions we put in. So a driven dimension is, it doesn't define it, it is simply reading it. That is all it is. What else do we have? Rectangular pattern, quite similar actually. I will draw another quick circle for that. Go down to rectangular pattern. And as you can see, it moves it along a line. Instead of around a point, it moves it along the line. And then you can obviously select the number of repeats, the distance. You can also select if you want from start to finish or between each element, the spacing. I prefer between each element because it's just easier to calculate sometimes. Depends on the situation. It's actually very situational. Direction, you can tell it to go both directions if you want, right? And then the same. You can also select axes for it to pattern along, but that's a different thing. And now we have a 3x3 grid without having to draw 9 entire circles. Modify. Okay, that's actually quite cool. Effectively, what a lot of these do, right? I do not straight up. I don't recommend doing fillet or chamfer in sketching. You can fillet and chamfer in the body itself. Actually, you can find them under modify, right? Fillet gives it a rounded corner, and you are obviously going to select the radius of that corner. And then chamfer gives it a hard, like a 45-degree bevel. That 45 degrees is negotiable. You can literally just come down here and change how you want to define it, but it gives you a bevel and a curve. That's chamfer and fillet. Also, if I wanted to be perpendicular to this face, right click, and oh no, the look at option doesn't come here. So you can select the face, you can go down here and select look at. I am now perpendicular to this face because it starts in this direction, right? So anyway, chamfer, fillet, and that's how you use look at. Get you perpendicular to something. All right, back to sketching. Yeah, don't use these two. Biggest problem with them is they break your dimensions. If I was to, actually, well, let's just do this, right? And I say 10 and 10. What it is doing is measuring from the endpoint. If I drop a fillet on this, um, constraints were removed. It is measuring to the point. I mean, this is actually a horrible example because it's a pre-made rectangle. But more times than not, if you're using the line tool to draw something, it'll measure end to end of line. But now that end of the line is somewhere over here, so that moves your dimension. Because this is a pre-made rectangle, the constraints are definitely applied. I apologize for the bad example, but don't do it in here. Generally a bad idea. Uh, blend curve, pretty self-explanatory. It merges two curves, no hard edges. Offset is quite cool. Saves you a lot of work even. I want to offset this hexagon, right? And by offset, I mean this. I don't want to draw an entire new hexagon. I just want to move it by a certain displacement. So let's say -3 because we're moving it outward. And of course, I can just flip it here. Done. And now I have a second hexagon, 3 millimeters from the first one. Right? And it has now given me a second sketch area. There's also a little option in there called offset. I mean, sorry, chain select. If you don't want the entire hexagon to get selected, you just disable this, and then you can select individually. Double clicking should also, no, not in this tool. Okay, then chain select. Obviously, I explained that. As we have trim and extend are quite nice, but God, they're going to take so long to explain. Here's the deal. Pretend there's something here, and I want to extend this line to the next point, right? So now it is going to extend it till it reaches the next. I mean, this is actually jumping step by step. I don't know why that happened. Odd. Anyway, it'll keep going. It'll keep extending till a set or the next geometrical line, circle, feature, whatever. Um, Other than that, there is break. So, or sorry, trim. Trim is also really nice. If I wanted to delete this line or a section of this line, I can't use delete because that gets rid of the entire line. So what I have to do is I have to go into trim and I can select this. It'll cut it off till the next intersection. So that's what happens there. Maybe I don't want to get rid of the line. Like, it'll break it wherever there is an intersection. So these are still here now, but they're two different lines as opposed to one line in the beginning, right? So here's sketch tools, constraints. I've already explained some of these, but horizontal vertical is actually a pretty bad constraint, I can't lie. But effectively, it if you have a line and if it is at below 45 degrees, it'll make it horizontal. Above 45 degrees, it'll make it vertical. That's its entire sole job. That's it. But the problem is, this is now defined as well vertical. But if I rotate my camera, it is now horizontal. If you rotate your sketch as well, that constraint is the first thing that's going to break. I do not like it, I'll be honest. There is coincident, one on top of another, tangent, a line meeting a curve, an arc, a circle at one point, equal, very simple to explain. I select these two, make them equal. Boom. If I change the length of this, the length of that changes. Parallel, these are already parallel simply because of how I drew them. Perpendicular, so these two, right? They're now perpendicular. And then I could make this on the lines. Fix, unfix is actually quite cool. Bit jugad in my opinion, but it is quite cool. All of these are blue, right? I can simply force the software to fix. I have not defined it in relation with the origin. I have not defined it in relation with any other body. It was free to move around in space. But now that I've told the software, forced it to fix it, it is now not going. I mean, the length is still free to change, but I can't move the line itself. If I was to dimension this, then even the length won't change. No, that's of course because it's not perpendicular. Anyway, oh sorry, midpoint. This is another useful thing. Midpoint is actually a little annoying sometimes. If I was to select two lines and make them midpoints, they will the middle of both the lines will coincide. Sometimes that's not what I want. Maybe I want this to meet here. So I will select only the point of it and then the line. And now the point is on the midpoint. Uh, can be a little annoying sometimes, but again, easy enough to figure out. Concentric, where the centers of the circles are on the same point. Collinear, all the lines are along the same axis. So, can I do that with? Sure. So these two are along two different axes because a line is an axis. If I select collinear, they pop under each other, basically. They are now along the same axis line. Symmetry, you can, I should remember how to use this particularly, but you can select around about what line you want symmetry to be maintained. Uh, Gaucho, I genuinely don't remember what this does. Then I will get on to these later. Inspect, we won't do that in Sketch. Insert, not now. No, fine. That's most of the Sketch tools. Um, I've explained some of the features. The rest of these are also pretty self-explanatory. Ribs and webs are supports. Uh, the idea is, right, if you wanted to make a cube and you did, oh, sorry, you wanted to make a shelf, right, and there needs to be space with it, you would, let me just quickly drop a sketch, I mean, shelf as well while we're at it. Or even better, let's just call it a bookshelf, right, a plank that we're going to mount on the wall. Easiest option, right? It is about this big, right? It can hold a couple books on it. Now, the thing is, from a like a strength perspective, if we were to attach this back face to the wall, it is not there is not a lot of material that is supporting when force is acting downward on this, right? This is all we've got. So then what we can do is we can use the ribs tool and we can add, well, ribs like that, supports effectively, something that will help take the weight of the bookshelf. Um, you just draw a sketch perpendicular to this body, and then you select the tool and you select the line. It makes it a rib. It automates that entire thing. Web is also quite similar. The image explains it quite well. Emboss is really cool. You can draw a sketch, and you can't draw on a curved surface. That's another thing. So sketching, you can do it only on flat surfaces, right? These are all planes. Planes are by definition flat. This is also a flat surface, so I can sketch on this. But if I was to, there we go. I can't sketch on this curved surface. It literally won't let me. If I select the sketch tool, it will not let me click on this curved surface. It'll let me click on the flat surface, but not the curved one, because you can't sketch on a curved surface. Then what you can do is you can simply go down to, I will do this. I will select this, and I will draw some sort of circle, something or the other, and I will go down to emboss, and I will select this. I will select the face, and what you will see now is that it is basically embossing the sketch. I don't have an alternate word for that. So there you go. It has now brought the sketch up to the surface and embossed it. There you go. Automated modeling is cool, but I just can't find a use case for it like ever. It's never worked properly in my case. SolidWorks and all do a better job at it. Fusion not so much, but it has had it for a very long time, and I hear from people it's quite good. Effectively, what you do is you have two bodies and you want some structure between them. Instead of going in, sketching, extruding, whatever feature you want to apply, instead of doing all that, you could simply go down to automated modeling. You can select, so in the image, right, the example image, blue is the parts you wanted to attach to, and then red is the parts you wanted to avoid. It'll ask you all that before you start. You click OK, and the computer will do its own thing, and it'll dish out a few suggestions. Um, I forgot what it's called. We have basically automated modeling has been around for a very long time. That and topology optimization, but they work. It's not something I ever find myself using. Press pull is quite cool, self-explanatory. You can literally just press and pull a face. Me personally, I prefer offset because offset is a combination of press pull and where is the other one? There was another option in here that I really can't seem to find right now. Huh. It basically, in my opinion, of my experience as well, offset is just a better option to use. You can, well, offset a face like parallel to itself. If that makes sense. Uh, pretty easily figure it out as you go. We have shell, or shell is actually quite nice. So instead of drawing two circles and extruding only the walls to make a shell, I can simply draw a circle. I can come back here and select the top face. So this is where the opening will be, and I can select a wall thickness. Let me make it 2 millimeter wall thickness, and boom, I now have um, a cylinder with a space in it. Cup, mug, jug, can. Then we have drafting is basically adding an angle, scaling, quite self-explanatory, big or small.